then you detail some solution or some highlight of what is a positive manifestation of all those forces and interactions within us, the manifestation. Then you gave a positive example of what can happen. 2 people, discussion, 3rd observer. I would like to get more understanding of that, because as a teacher and someone who's going to build a school and build that into what the children get to use, take those tools forward, right? I think that would be more useful for me to understand. So, and then ritual, right? And rites of passage, okay? A native elder, a friend of mine in Vancouver, called me. We had a long talk, and some things came out of that, some things that I wrote down. And one of those was, he said, well, the first thing he said was, I've been listening to everything you're telling me, but I want to ask you a question. Do you love yourself? And that was a very useful question. That was a very useful question, because I found it very easy to tell others, you're awesome, to encourage others. And then I thought, why don't I find it as easy to encourage myself? I thought, that's a very interesting question. And so that got me going, thinking about things a little bit differently. Very simple, maybe corny to someone who doesn't understand what it's like to be at the precipice. I did it. I didn't prepare my tools for self-destruction, but I'm going that way. It was pretty dark. I hate that time in Canada now because, again, more trauma. You just get tired of it. You want to move on to something green and positive and living. So then he also gave me instructions. He said, when you're 7 years of age, that is the time for a specific ceremony where you join the human family and you give away your favorite toy, and you say, and we are told, you are no longer a child. You give away your toy. Now you have certain responsibilities and certain duties, and then this is your learning path now, this kind of thing. And the person introduces themselves and says, this is me. I was an infant. I am now a child. This is who I am. And then you lay a blanket on that person to welcome them and to show your support for what they're going to do. And this is done, again, at the puberty, right? So these things have great meaning. And we were intended also to follow our human and anatomical development. All these things parallel, right? The trivium and stuff like that. You don't teach that to a child the same way that you would teach it to someone in puberty or an adult or even a grandparent. Thank you both. Thank you all for listening.
Well, I can relate to you. I can really relate to you. I've had 5 near-death experiences. And one of them was because I had, my first one, I was hit by a car when I was 5, completely run over. And after that, I kind of got a really sensitivity to electromagnetic fields and sound. And so I know what that's like. I know what it's like to face your own death, your own mortality, so to speak. And there's no greater thing to actually see that separates you from the alignment of ego. But something that I just wanted to mention, a lot of people, when they look in the mirror, they're still seeing through the belief system of their self-ego. And it's very difficult for most people to say into the mirror that I love you to yourself. No one's around. And so it's a good gauge to do that. Another good gauge with the mirror too, I'm going to actually suggest everyone today does this to a mirror, is go up to a bathroom mirror or some mirror or whatever, and rather than just looking at the mirror and then just looking at your face, is go right up to the mirror until your 2 eyes start to become 1 eye, like a cyclops. And then start that process, right? Now that, and this is what you're saying about ancestral stuff and rites of passage. A lot of these things of connecting and bonding that way is, so when 2 people come in, for an example, like you just did, what that is rather than the self-reflection of your own 2 eyes, now it's 2 people coming together as 1 eye and 1 eye. You're staring eye together. And that, if I was to hook you guys up to a bioscanner, I would instantly see your nervous system and your heart and your entire whole endocrine system completely change instantly, just from what you just did. The old ancestral ways was they used to have conclaves, circles, right? This was the origin, right? And the circle actually came from, Mark, you know how much I've studied about the ancient standing stones.
Stonehenge, and I mean, this
Yeah.
is what you do. You
Right, we supposed to actually come together as a circle, and then that metaphor was taken after the comet strike of basically leveled Britain and ended that old empire, and then the hordes basically came in under the Anglo-Saxon mercenaries, and so by doing that, they tried to steal. And this is what, like, the invading of countries and stealing their artifacts were all about. This is why the British Museum, right? It's what it is. It's a war chest. That's what the British Museum truly is. It's a war chest where they stole all the indigenous, because they're stealing the actual ancient astral connections to everybody's ancestors through these artifacts. And these are the ones who created the fraud of atomic theory. Right.
The rod, yeah.
Right, which they did everything to completely hijack and wipe out the postulations of the ether, which is what Tesla was all about. This is why Tesla was such a genius, was because he had tapped that, just like Rota. Nobody even knows who he is. I've studied a lot of my work of ancient sites has to do with these telluric currents, these telluric fields, and I've demonstrated with you with sound, you know, how you can create wind and certain stuff. I think when I first met you,
I've seen photos of other figures. I don't know. It's weird, but yeah, it's always an experience with you, Brian. Like you always bring out the magic around you, right? Like you always show me these like little hidden Schrödinger's cats, right, everywhere. I'm like, oh shit, what's going on now? Oh, how did you do that? Like, oh, you know where I lost the? Remember that time we went we went camping and I lost, can't remember, a knife or something.
Right,
and you're like. I don't know what you did, and you were like, "Oh, it's over there." I'm like, "How did you know that?" I'm like, but you tell me, but I'm like, I still can't understand it 100%. But it's amazing, yeah. No, it's quite an experience with you, Brian.
Oh, cheers! Because I actually understand this process, and the reason I understand it is because I live it, and that's the whole thing. Is when you live it, what happens is by living it, you're actually changing basically the information field of reality, and true magic happens. True magic.
Yeah, no, this is the thing. It doesn't happen when I'm walking around, but when I'm walking with you, I start seeing all sorts of stuff. So it is kind of it's what I said. There's another power, right? That and I don't know,
Mark. It could, and you're aware of it. Shouldn't it become more present and more manifested in your life that our awareness expands?
No, but I mean, unique with Brian, right? Like really, like there's things there that are like I don't think that would happen with everybody. And even if I had, maybe I have that kind of magic stuff going on. I don't see it myself, but you know, I'm sure Brian sometimes, you know, just carries on like normal, and in the meantime for other people it's like wow, and he's like yeah that happens all the time, right? So maybe that's the case with me in some ways. What
I've been showing or actually teaching clients for a number of years, well, since 2014, I was doing stuff with reframing, right? So basically reframing reality around that, and then people were getting crazy results. They were getting like, you know, investments, they were getting relationships fixed, all kinds of things, and the reason is because we're locked into this illusion of linear time moving forward. So for some reason we've locked ourselves into the Babylonian 360-degree cult, whereas we're actually not. We're each a subjective universe. That's a whole other topic. Think of your center point of your consciousness into the quantum nature of the information fields of reality, is then therefore generating a 360-degree consciousness. And within that consciousness, so is your five senses, including also your body. So that means that everything you're experiencing as the universe is an outside reality isn't outside at all. It's experienced within your consciousness. So if you're looking up at the sky at night and you're seeing the stars aren't hundreds of thousands of light years away. The stars are in you. You're already experiencing this. So there's already a correlation in the information field. There's a name that basically is a delusional way of thinking that you are the entire universe and there's nothing else. I'm not suggesting that, I'm suggesting that the interface that we have of what we're seeing in reality is just like kind of what the solipsism. Thank you so much. That's the one I was looking for.
Sloppycism.
Right. So, and I mean, that's being leveraged as coached by cerebrals, but Dr. Hoffman, who's, been using quantum computers to model the nature of this thing, he says that we're not wired to see the actual truth of the matrix, so to speak, because then we wouldn't ever actually, do what we're doing. We just, there wouldn't be any point. So specifically what reality is forming itself is almost kind of like just like a desktop interface. Like each one of us is seeing each other on this Zoom call right now. And so we can talk and interact, but is each one of these, you're hearing my voice and you're seeing my picture, but you're not hearing my voice or seeing my picture at all. I'm going through a compressed service that's going through data packets of information, and it's being streamed and then repackaged on the other end, and you're seeing a reasonable facsimile of me. So what we do is we fall asleep into the nature that we're all talking to each other right now, but every single one of us is completely separate and alone. And so also is our vision of what the world is from this an objective worldview. An objective consensus is actually really a kind of a form shared illusion of sorts. When you understand that and you see that, well, the science, right, that's trying to model the nature of reality is also doing it from within within the matrix to do it. So it's kind of like when you go into say an elevator, and you're in an elevator and all four walls of the elevator are mirrors, and you see a constant infinite series, right, going off into infinity of an effect, of an effect, of an effect, of an effect, and an effect. And ultimately that's why material science fails, because it's only ever going to deal with the effects of effects of effects that's actually being generated from consciousness. So if you remove consciousness from the standpoint of the observer, then it's already convoluted. So likewise, we're each interacting through these information fields, and like what Dr. Hoffman said, is kind of like, just like this Zoom thing. Think of everything in reality as what you, even though you have tactile sense and you can touch things, they're all just like icons on a desktop. Mm-hmm. It's just packets of information, and then our belief system through the constructive mind constructs it as a reality. Mm-hmm. And that's why when you mess with optics, you can have optic illusions like parallax views, where it looks like there's like things are moving, but they're not actually moving. We've all seen those things that you look online, pictures or graphics that boggles your mind, and you start seeing spots everywhere, right? But nothing's actually moving. And reality is like that too, is you've got motion without true movement. Because as everything is flashing off from the information fields into the constructive, what I call the past, because material reality is the past. By the time it's formed into solid matter, it's actually become the past. So specifically, it's like a flashline sequence, right? But it's moving so fast, just like a film. A movie film is going like 24 frames a second or whatever. It appears so real that we don't have the kind of experience of experiencing the frame rates. But if you have a near-death experience, you're taking yourself out of the frame rate of what that's generated, and then that's when you kind of have that different kind of paradigm. Now, I'm going to leave it with this because I'm talking so much, and specifically, I know time's rolling on. When you're concentrating on something, you can only actually, in your conscious limited five senses, whatever you're looking at, especially with your eyes, you can actually only truly see about an area the size of your thumbnail. Wherever you look, everything else in your peripheral view is limited. You can't experience all your peripheral view.
Okay, hang on. So those proteins can actually develop or form through radiation that we're going through space, and then you hit some way. I don't know how this works.
And
but
ultimately, that's what it's always been about, is disconnecting us from that natural evolution, because we're supposed to actually not slowly evolve over millions of years of survival of the fittest. We're actually supposed to go when we realize. Enlightenment is a new age trap. The highest form there is realization. It's realization that switches the gene. The DNA, the gene will oscillate according to the environment. Like Bruce Lipton's work and stuff like that. When you start to fully live, not just believe, but actually live something, then what ends up happening to your brain is the structure and the function appears. The brain can already determine 11 dimensions. Go look that up. There's a quiet science study that's right. We've discovered that the brain has structure and function in 11 dimensions. What? And they're calling stuff junk science, like junk DNA and all that, right? Because there's so much of DNA that well, it's not that it's just because they're still looking at it from the one-sided narrow perspective, because they're not allowed under the basically the Roman Sabbatean system that's holding all this in place.
We can't make sense of your tonsils, so we should just cut it out.
Right.
So essentially, the Genome Project was saying, oh yeah, we decoded the entire genome. And so essentially they're saying 95% of DNA is junk. So it's like saying, well, we uncovered 5% and the rest we don't know. So it's like, why don't you just say you don't know?
Or 95% of junk. That's pretty much what they've been saying. Like, how much was that project? Oh, well, it's basically junk. We spent $3 billion. It's junk.
That's really what this whole control chokeholds is all about. Because the entire whole kit and caboodle is all run off of insurance bonds. It's all commerce. It's all money.
And also, too, when you talk about the genetic and epigenetic expression of our families, our forefathers, our ancestors, I kind of wonder, don't you ever wonder, wouldn't our forefathers be laughing at us right now? Or maybe crying? Or maybe angry with us? Or maybe, who knows? Now, when I was interested in plants as ladders I was, how it's put out there that they are entheogens, they're God givers and God communicators, and how is it West Africa? It's the plant of the ancestors, and using the iboga, they're able to speak with their ancestors. I'm not so interested in being a suggestible individual, and with these substances being used to help my mind be more easily controlled.
Oh, you mean like ayahuasca? Same thing, right?
I've actually been a strong advocate of not using ayahuasca for the simple fact that I really do understand the Earth's telluric currents, and that's the back end of my whole life's work with sound.
Damn it, Brian! I just wanted the one experience, right, of ayahuasca, and
well, let me explain why. I'm not saying that as an absolute. I'm a strong advocate against doing ayahuasca out of its native environment.
Oh yeah. No, you gotta respect it. It's like all the
right. So in the northern hemisphere, in the West, and in Europe and stuff, is the psilocybin is the natural medicine that's indigenous to these regions. And so what's actually happening with these entheogens that's causing entroptic distortion, which then gets you into the seeing other things, whatever. And so when you take something from one location to another location, it's not matching the same current velocity, because light is, let me explain what light is light is not a speed of photons.
It's not a constant.
It's not a constant. Gravity's not a constant. That's a joke. Not a constant. That's a joke. What they do, they chart it over time, because actually it's an oscillation. And so then what they do is they take the average mean of that oscillation, and then they set that as a standard. And then they create an entire whole science resting on that standard, right? Just like they do with the second, with Hertz waves. So the number is arbitrary, right? The number system's arbitrary, but if you change the length of the second, like a slinky, right, your data set no longer lines up with the old data set that you measured on the previous second, right? So I hope that's kind of, clear of, because everybody's, like, for an example, people are all on these, like, frequency tones online. Man, if I was to play them for you right there, they don't even make musical sense. A lot of people are claiming in these new age movements about royal rife tones, these healing tones and stuff. Well, when Raymond Rife was, looking at coherent tones, because that's what's actually doing the healing is your electrical charge. So specifically, according to the charge, is what expedites the healing. And so when Raymond Rife was cataloging all that stuff in the 1920s, 1930s, the second he was using the calibration of the instruments was different than it is today. It just changed again. Remember I warned you? I said, oh my God, they're going to change the SI units. And sure enough,
they keep on changing it, yeah.
Right?
I'm not sure how you find that out. I would be super interested to, like, is it some kind of, like, it must be done privately, or, I mean, I can't see it being, because, that, obviously we're talking about thousands, all the people that will be working in that kind of field, how they're affected and how they've, like...
The other thing is this whole thing of, like, the inclusion of one is the exclusion of the other. So this is a conspiracy theory, because that means everybody would have to be in on it. No, look at how the structures of everything is being compartmentalized. Occupations, the whole idea of education through university, the schooling is nothing other than obedience training. And it's obedience training based on, because every level of occupation back-ended by a bond. I found that stuff out years ago through the Rorik Pact. Google this Blue Shield, right? So they're all running these insurance.
You told me that. Yeah.
Right. So therefore, when you're going through school and you want to become a scientist, you got to, like, burn yourself out PhD. What you're actually doing is you're buying a license to plunder under that occupation.
Oh, yeah.
Right?
Yeah, they can do whatever they want. So, yeah, these titles are really exactly that, allowing people to go and walk around with a status, right? Oh, no, they are godly because, they're clever and they, honorable members in society. But ultimately, like, they're just getting away with murder. You're
right. And the reason why they're getting away with murder is because what's happened is it all goes back to this rites of passage, which then it became ritual. And then what happened was that the rituals were then stolen by the fake establishment that we have today. And then those rituals then got written into commercial means and then became procedure. That's why the entire whole deck of cards is all collapsing, because it's lost its original origins, first to rites of passage, which then became ritual, and then the ritual got forgotten. All this thing of court and all this, right? People go in front of an administrative court not knowing that it's not a real court. It's actually what it is. It's a Shakespeare pantomime of Orpheus going through the underworld. We discussed this a while ago about this. It's the world of Mundus. It's all about paying the boatman through the ferry. And there's a lot around that, but specifically is the judge is actually dressed up as the Grim Reaper. It's the gala. He's wearing the gala. The black robe is death.
Next time I'll come in with a sickle, and I'll be like, "You're missing your sickle."
It comes under the Magyar Sabbatean, rites of the Venice Doges, which were playing all these pantomimes out, like back in the Pisan days. It's the rite of ferrying the dead soul, known as the person, through the underworld.
Wow.
But what they did was they commercialized that pantomime and made all crime commercial. And so, as a result, is what they did was they lost their own ritual, which then became procedure. There's no right of conveyance through procedure. And this is actually why there's just, we've now got these psychopaths that are, ruling these things, because ultimately these people themselves are so gone at this point. They're so lost that the trauma in them is so genetically prevalent that they're completely cut off from their own sources and they're hopelessly entrapped. So the whole thing, why originally me looking into this, was researching down the origins of why they were able to leverage all that in the first place. And it comes down to a series of cataclysms. I'm not someone to sit and Google something and, oh, that came up on Google. I'm a guy who goes places, been all over the world, looking at ancient sites, going through Indonesia, spent 3.5 years specifically at one place in Ireland just to chart the telluric fields around these stones. People talk about Stonehenge. Stonehenge is a sales funnel, folks. I needed to know all this stuff from the perspective of, well, most of us humans are broken. Number one, I worked with plants for years, with frequencies, with plants, programming the exclusion zone of water. And then what I did was I started working with animals. There's a video on my website. There's the reason why I lured the tuning and music years ago, because I understood this, and I don't share a lot of stuff publicly because of the amount of targeting. What it does is the music creates a higher sensitivity, so you can actually start to connect to fields. You'll see a video of animals helping animals. They don't have an ego. They just move through their stuff immediately. It doesn't even take like a while. Just within minutes, they're already doing trauma releases, because the natural condition of our biological life is to shake trauma. This is why when a gazelle is out running, trying to run away from a lion, it's suddenly grazing, then it's in a fight or flight for its life. And it's running. And then when it's survived and it's calm again, what it does is it shakes. But all animals do that. You'll see dogs shake. You'll see them shake. Everything shake, because what they're doing is the fight or flight system, reactive mind, it creates an acidosis in the body, and that acid starts eating at the muscle. So the way to actually release the trauma out of the nervous system is the biological order needs to shake. So that process has been interrupted by all the stuff that's been thrown at us as distractions, so that we're never able to actually trauma release properly.
How can they get hold of you quickly? Is it just your email address? Maybe you can just throw that in the chat.
Yeah, I'll put it in.
Okay. All right. No, that's great. Please, if I think that would be great is if you can come in on Monday and follow up a little bit on the cataclysms, because you've told it to me a couple times, and it's always something that puts me back a little bit, because it's.
Well, we'll see, because that was the whole reason why. Because I thought, why is it that everyone's going for counseling, they're doing all these things, and then all of these behaviors come up like a year later or whatever? Something's not being resolved by all the healing systems on this world. What's going on? The people are going to like getting healing sessions here, and then it's coming back and back, and then it's like, okay, I went down the origin of going to these places. I went to go actually look at the debris field in South Ireland and Devon, and because that's where this comet strike hit. But it's just pelted the.
Yeah, that's what you're saying. Yeah.
Right. So yeah, I'll get into that, because what's happened is all the major religions of the world, which are sales funnels, right? They've all through symbolism, because symbols. You were talking about this thing with moving someone to the side of the head. I used to, in workshops, like draw a symbol of an arrow on a piece of paper, and then have someone hold it and muscle test them. And when the arrow is pointing towards you, you're strong, and when the arrow is pointing away from you, you're totally weak. And that's what symbolism does, is because symbolism is what the building blocks of our reality is. So that's why symbolism is being leveraged even more than language. And that's actually why super powerful corporations are ruling the world. They're connected to some of these ancient symbols that we've forgotten about.